Hello, my name is Rodrigo Ledesma, and I'm going to be answering the questions provided by Duolong Systems for the interview. Perfect. For example, when we analyze the situation of allowing a member of a society who has been in jail go again into the society, we need to understand many different concepts before we start looking into the data. We need to understand the implications of the actions, the legal actions and requirements. We need to understand the economical situation of this person, the social situation. Once we understand what happened and why it happened, then we can understand the process for them to re enter the society. This is a very sensitive topic that should be handled very carefully and with lots of respect and also compassion. The thing here, in my case, is that we need to do a very detailed research on the social implications and also on the daily lives of these people so that we can understand then how we can collect data and which type of technological tools we're going to be using. Maybe we're going to be creating a chatbot. Maybe we're going to just be creating using the large language model to be fine tuned and to make some predictions on maybe which actions they should take next, or I don't know, many different possibilities that we need to do. So first step, understand what happened. Second step, understand where they are now. And third step, get the necessary information to create the technological solution. Now, regarding which technologies I would use to solve this problem and to implement this project, personally, I feel very comfortable with the libraries and the frameworks given by Hugging Face, and specifically BERT and ChatGPT. And now, well, variations on BERT, depending on our task, the resources that we have to train the model or to fine tune the model. But mostly I like these two as base because as they are two of the most popular language models, they have already been, of course, fine tuned, but very big corpuses. And there might be something already in Hugging Face that has been maybe fine tuned to our needs or our expectations. Otherwise, we can always get the base of the pre-trained model and fine-tune it ourselves with the data sets that we have collected, or maybe not a data set, maybe with texts, generally speaking, depending on the project. Here I can talk more about how to fine-tune these models, maybe in an interview if you need. And now let's talk about the steps or the pipeline. The first thing that we need to do, let's say that we have clear what type of tool we're going to be using. Let's say that just for this purpose, we're just going to be using maybe Roberta because we have the resources and the time to use it. So once we know what is expected from us, we need to do some data collection. In here, the data collection, it will take a lot of time. It's not an easy process. We can use, for example, web scraping. We can also do surveys to collect more information. There might be some databases available online that might be helping us. We can create our own databases, of course. After we collect the data, we store it, and of course we need to clean it. We can proceed to the training the model. In this case, training the model can be split in two because, for example, the transformer-based models, such as Roberta, they have already been pre-trained with very large corpuses. But they might not have the precision that we need, or whichever metric we want to use. So the first step would be to test them with the data that we have. Second step, if we don't like how the performance of our model is to fine-tune them. One of the most common ways to fine-tune it is, of course, to ask the model to predict the next token. So we need label data for this, and at the end we're going to be checking, validating the efficiency of the prediction of the tokens with data that the model has never seen. Now, the interface development, in this case, that would be a little bit out of our reach. I don't know how huge the company is. I have a little bit of experience using CSS, HTML, Bootstrap, Node.js, a little bit of JavaScript, so we can implement the user interface, the UI, for us to communicate with the user. And of course, one of the most important parts would be the deployment. Nowadays, with all the cloud-based tools that we have, it should be not as complicated as maybe a couple years ago. I have some video tutorials on how to deploy a machine learning model using the Google Cloud services, just for storing the model and then requesting some predictions, and the cost there changes based on how many predictions and the availability. That's how we can tackle this problem. Now, let's say that our model is already about to be deployed to production. We need to check if our model is good enough as to be deployed and used by the users. Sorry about the redundancy there. We have two different types of testing. The testing that should be done, for example, analyzing the accuracy, the precision, F1 metrics of the model. All of that depends on what we're looking for, and I can talk more about them in an interview. Those ones are pretty standard, and then we can talk about the evaluation of the model, but more on a service, how fluent our model is, if it has any bias, how coherent the answers are based on different approaches, if the information generated by the model has actual relevance. All of these metrics could be difficult to evaluate, but they are important, given that, for example, we should be competing with ChatGPT, which levels of coherence are amazing. Now, a very important topic here, the collaboration techniques. For me, it's important to know the position of each team member and also the role within the group. Where I used to work, some of the projects were done with waterfall methodology. Others we were trying to introduce agile and the Scrum methodologies. It's important to know when to use each one, as not for all companies agile is possible, and for some companies waterfall is not also the greatest, or maybe a combination that we used to call water agile. That let's not do that, please. For keeping track of the tasks, I am comfortable using Jira. It is a good tool when used properly. Keeping track of the versions of the code and to keep it safe, I also know how to use GitHub. Comments are always good when doing the push. And in order to have a good and efficient communication, we can always use Teams or Slack. I don't recommend WhatsApp. but it's important to be able to have a channel where the ideas can be presented, stored, and of course heard. Okay, for question number 2, I'm going to be talking about 2 projects of mine that are relevant for this position. The first one consisted of recreating how some cyber attacks are done, and the purpose of the project was to try to get a novelty machine learning model to try to avoid or try to catch those attacks before they reach the machine. So we had a virtual environment with virtual machines. Those virtual machines live in 3 different computers, and we just created a WAN and a LAN for the communication within them. The purpose of some of the virtual machines was to using malware softwares. Well, they're not malware softwares, but there's software such as HPing3, which just send ping packages through the network and recreating a DOS attack, a denial of service. So these packets traveled through the network and they attacked a vulnerable machine, metasploitable, if this is relevant. Now, here we collected 2 different types of data sets. The most relevant for this position would be the logs of the Linux machines. We were trying to figure out if there was any hidden information in the logs that could be related to these attacks. Also, we created another data set containing more of the IP information, IP packets, like the things we get from a Wireshark. This is some general information about my project. The important part here is that for the natural language processing part, we use Python, of course, pandas, NumPy. Also, we use BERT, and we used a pre-trained version of BERT downloaded from Hugging Face specifically. But we also created a hard coding model. This consisted of 2 different models. One model is going to analyze the logs using natural language processing. The other one is going to analyze the IP packets encoded. So both of them were going to have a vote. And based on this vote, we would say if some IP track or some logs contained or not a presence of malware, for example. Okay, so coming back, I created 2 different models. One was a random forest, the other one was BERT, and we had to get a lot of data. The challenging part, one of the most challenging, was getting that data out of the LAN, because we were dealing with Linux machines. So some of them were very, very basic. So we had to use, for example, JavaScript and Node.js. But once we collected the data and cleaned it, we could now train the random forest. In this case, we use a pre-trained version of BERT because of resources and because of time. And these ones were the metrics that I used to evaluate the performance of the model. As you can see, some of them, well, we can see first that we use just random forest, then we use BERT, then we use the voting algorithm, and we use windows of time. For example, if we're analyzing a log that was processed at 7 p.m., first we see, okay, let's analyze just that one. But then we created groups. Okay, let's analyze the logs that were between 7, 6:59, and 7:01. And this improved the performance of our model. We can discuss why we use F1 recall and precision in an interview, and we can discuss why the recall is a little bit large in here. Alright, the second project I want to talk about that is quite relevant for this position is the following. Let's say when we are working with Scrum and Agile, we know that we need to define what the user needs, or in this case what the client needs, in user stories. User story has, well, me as a client need to, you know so in this case, every now and then the whole team has to gather to write this, and also to evaluate them, to say, oh, okay, this user story is, I need to create a web interface for my client. Okay, that's going to be very complicated, so we estimate 100 hours of work, and the story points, which are, well, in our case we use the Fibonacci sequence, which might not be extremely accurate, but let's say that it is very, very complicated, so it went to 11 points. This is very time consuming, and also this is supposed to be done by the whole team and supported by the Scrum Master. But let's be realistic. Sometimes the developers are going to be taking care of this, and it should not be their role. So the purpose of our project was to create a model who could understand the description of the user stories and automatically assign some users some story points, or maybe some effort estimation points, and also maybe some time, like the amount of hours it might be taking for this task to be completed. This was challenging, and we will see why later. Alright, so moving on. For this project, we use again Hugging Face and BERT-like models. Specifically, we used BERT and also DistillBERT, and we compared the performance of both models. This is important to say. We used the pre-trained models, and then we fine-tuned them according to our needs, as the dataset was big enough. Let me just tell you that this dataset was publicly available. It consisted of 32 different technological projects of one same company. Of course, there is no PII data here. And those projects were grouped into subtopics. The performance of the models, according to the authors, could be improved if you train and fine-tune the models in a specific subgroup. But this was not our case. We needed to have like a lot of information, and the performance was not as great as the original paper. Nonetheless, our results were very acceptable, and the models work very good. And it doesn't really matter what I say. I need to show you the performance metrics that we use, because only when you analyze the metrics you can know if there is something to improve. So moving on. This project was complicated due to the nature of the vocabulary that was used here. The language models are pre-trained on, for example, Wikipedia and everything that is in Wikipedia. But the vocabulary that we use in a technology project is different, and we have technical words, we have names of people, names of technologies, names of projects. So we had to deal with this special type of information, and because of this, our project got complicated. And also, this was one of the reasons why the authors of the datasets suggested to group the projects by categories. Nonetheless, our results are acceptable. Of course, random guessing was our base. We also use zero rule. And then our BERT model, that was the one that performed the best when compared with the DistillBERT. And you can see there is an actual improvement in the accuracy of the predictions. here we're not going to be having any graphs or text because I think I can give you this information by myself. With the invention of transformers and attention, there was a leap on how the performance of the models were actually performing, and this was good. ChatGPT was based on transformers. Go for reinforcement learning was also made with transformers. So the possibilities that we can have with transformers are literally limitless. I think that right now this is the future, and now that we live in a society where everyone has a phone and that we can obtain data from everywhere and from anyone, it will be very easy or easier to make an impact in society. This is going to be hard because there will always be people who are going to be using the information for their own benefit. But if we use the information in the correct way, we can actually make our society improve. For example, in the case that we were talking about in question one, how can people who have been in jail get restarted in the society? That would be very good. Maybe we can use a chatbot where they can ask questions or they can ask for some solutions, some activities, something that might be beneficial for them. Right, so this is a crucial topic for any AI project nowadays. I'm pretty sure that we all remember Tai, the chatbot that Microsoft released a couple years ago, that it was trained by its interaction with Twitter and the tweets from people, and we cannot do anything about it. People are going to be mean because they think it's funny, and at the end of the day, this chatbot was extremely racist, so they had to shut him down. But in this case, transparency is extremely important because we need to let the users know where the information comes from. If they make a request to our chatbot and the chatbot gives them an answer, it is important that they understand how that answer was created, and for this we need to understand where our data comes from. And not talking about data, we can go to the last point, data privacy and compliance. We need to make sure that whenever we are collecting data and storing it, users are fully aware that their data is being used. Where is it stored? We need to do some compliance in this case. For example, we need to store it in a safe place. We might have, for example, in my last job, we have problems because we could not get data out of the country, and for storing it in a cloud environment using AWS, the data should be distributed throughout different servers around the world. Well, technically just around the continent. But for example, accountability, we might be using, for example, a platform where users can write comments, can write suggestions, or even they can write their complaints about the service that we are providing. And of course, fairness, everybody should be able to use our platform as equally, and giving them, each and every one of them, the same treatment so that the experience is unified and each user is getting the best out of the interaction with our services.